quiet until then. Alrighty. So we are 1 minute past. So we will go ahead and get started. This is the SACM working group. And Chris and I are your co-chairs for this working group. There's Chris's smiling face. So hold on, let me. This here is the note well for the IETF that you will have seen in many locations. Please be aware of its contents. I'd like to remind you all that you all are to participate in a respectful and courteous manner, and we are all here to help each other achieve our ultimate objective of stronger and better standards for the IETF. We have a very short agenda for today. One thing, do we have a note taker? Is that going to be you, Chris?
Like there's any other.
All right, so you're going to take notes. Okay, we need to get rid of the echo. Excellent. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about the architecture document that has been moving around, and also the COSWID document, and then talk about way ahead. I was sort of hesitant. I was sort of dragging my feet because Adam Montville was supposed to talk about the architecture, and then he's had a last minute conflict. And then Kathleen Moriarty said she would step in. And so we don't have either of them here at the moment. So
do we want to agenda bash and maybe swap COSWID first?
Yeah, I mean, I actually put COSWID first originally, and then I moved SACM architecture up because Kathleen said she needed to leave early. So I was, but since I don't see her, we will swap it back, and COSWID will be next. So I know there's no slides or anything for COSWID. I don't know if Hank or David, if one of you wants to talk about the current status of COSWID and the updates for that. Go ahead, Hank.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, first of all, thank you, Roman, for being patient with us. I think your concerns and issues and contribution have been addressed. Now we are in the phase of finalizing some of the leftovers of the area and directory reviews. That's on us. I thought we were thorough, but to be honest, it's kind of hard to keep track of this when there is no issue tracker, but you have a text review, and so we everything that was an issue and that was in the Romans and thing we addressed. But it appears, and Roman, again, you are the gatekeeper here. Thank you a lot for taking on that responsibility. I think we have like 4.5 issues left there, and Dave might have more input on that.
I don't think there's any normative changes based on the remaining area reviews.
Yeah, that's correct. But there's some nitty things, so I don't know how we have to deal with that. Maybe you do have a concept for that.
Hank, you're asking me?
Yeah, Dave, exactly. So I also agree. I agree. So I don't think there's any normative problems anymore with the document. So normatively, this can progress. I think there's some polishing items, but I don't think they're a blocker in that at all. We can resolve these in ISG review.
So I think Roman has posted in the chat that as far as he's concerned, there's a number of some feedback that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, but is that a normative feedback, or is this editorial?
No, there are some things. Yeah, some things got pointed out about, I think, specifically how the IANA registries got shaped, and we need to bang that out to resolve that before we go to IETF last call, because how we handle the behavior of the registries is something the community is going to want input on.
Okay, so we are of course in dialogue with IANA apparently. So and they have not raised that exact issue. So that is a question of favorite art. So yeah, how would you propose to resolve that? Like presenting the question to the list and let other people decide on this? I guess that the working group should be the arbiter here.
Right. I mean, IANA is going to take the action that is recommended in the document, but the reviewers pointed out some things about how things are registered in IANA, and we need to resolve that, I think, here in the working group.
Okay, so we will take your recent inputs on the IANA topics and put them to basically we resolve them like in a 2 weeks period on the working group list, and then go from there.
Okay. So did you make note of the email that Roman has linked in the chat so that you guys can follow up on that email?
Yeah, I'm aware of Roman's input, but I actually thought it was more of a style matter and not really a working group decision at this point.
Yeah, I think the decision was really about what we name the registry or what path we choose for the registry, which is more style than
exactly. So that's what my interpretation is also. But if you think we have to bring this back to the list, sure. But I also think we could just provide a preference.
Well, I think the point is that there needs to be another update to the document before Roman sends it to IETF last call. So whether it needs to come back.
Karen, acoustic, I did not get that. Sorry, please rephrase that.
I think the point is that there needs to be an update done before it moves to the next step. So you guys need to do that update.
Yes. That seems to be in order. Okay, I'm with you.
Okay,
The other changes, the other discussion was not about the name of the registry. It was actually which registry it was going in and double checking whether it's SWID or co-SWID.
Yeah, that's double
And
checking.
that's a
Exactly.
design issue.
So, and I think, and Dave, okay, but before I taint any discussion here, Dave, do you have an, you want to voice a preference here right now? Because I have one, but I want to taint the discussion.
I think right now, I was just going to look at the draft. I think right now it's SWID, and the intent behind that is the registries that deal with controlled, vocabularies for co-SWID also are to be used for the ISO SWID tag standard as well, and so we named it SWID just to be sort of in the middle between the two, and so that the registries could be used by both. And that's also why we reserved space in the registrations to allow for both specification required and standards track submissions, so that that ISO could submit updates as well. I think that was the rationale for why it's named the way that it is.
Exactly.
So should we more or less respond to the area review in that vein?
So I think the problem here is that there
Yeah.
was, the notion was, but we are not SWID. So if we want to have the same, let's call it major space that is SWID, and then they're always tied to that. And I think some of the standards text now says we might not be tied to that. We might be better, so to speak. And now there's a discrepancy between tying ourselves to the semantic realm of just pure SWID and the improvements that co-SWID could provide and does provide to some extent. That's not interoperable today, but maybe in the future. And so why tie it to the SWID space and not with the co-SWID space? I think that was Roman's question. But Roman, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, you're exactly right, Hank. I mean, we had talked about the possibility that co-SWID would track but diverge with optimizations and improvements that SWID would not have. And then if that's the case, we're talking about a different animal. So
yeah.
Scott is
Well,
correct in pointing out that co-SWID should be where we hook it.
There's two different kinds of registrations in the what's proposed as the SWID registry. There's the registrations that deal with controlled vocabulary values, which from the beginning we've always wanted to stay in sync with with SWID tags on, and those are the ones that I was referring to. Then there's a tag registry for co-SWID, which would allow us to add new tags to the standard over time. Tags which may either synchronize or diverge, from the SWID tag standard. That registry allows us to, to act in a way that is meaningful for co-SWID and has no impact on the SWID standard. So I think if we approach it in that way, we get the best of both worlds. We can synchronize with SWID where it's meaningful to do so, and have room to to continue to enhance co-SWID, where there's also a need to do so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think both unfortunately make really sense. But I think the formal problem here is that we cannot give a guarantee that ISO will follow our tracks, which I'm relatively certain they will, to be honest. But on
Right.
the other hand, we can't assume that. So that's Roman's argument. So there's a conundrum here of that we are pretty sure and effectively, I think we're actually correct, that ISO will follow our tracks, but also we can't put that into an IETF text because we don't have the authority to do that. So
Right, and in no way is our hands tied, from a COSWID perspective, based on what ISO does. So I don't see the harm.
No, there's no harm. There's just a let's call it a procedural conflict. I would see that. I think in reality, if you look at this realistic, there's no problem. But if you look at this procedure-wise, I understand Roman's hesitancy to say this is tied to ISO, and I think I read appropriate wording on the list that seems awkward. Lucy, thank you for that. Yeah, I can see also that. So I wonder what is the harm of creating a different COSWID lane here. I totally agree, David, with your assessment that this should be the same because that is a benefit. That is a value added.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, well, let's think about what the alternative would be, right? The alternative would be ISO would have to work with IANA in order to, develop a SWID lane, and then there would be all of the overhead of having to synchronize the COSWID and SWID lanes. If we wanted that synchronization, we kind of get that for free, really at no cost to COSWID with the current approach. So, I mean, this decision point that we're at is either, do we effectively commit ourselves to divergence from COSWID, or a whole ton of overhead and pain, or do we move forward with a path that will allow them to be synchronized, where it's meaningful to do so? I think the right decision is to move forward in the way that we've proposed. And again, it has no downside to COSWID since COSWID is establishing this registry, and COSWID can continue to evolve independently if it wants to.
Yeah, I think it might look suspicious at first, but I think the benefits really outweigh the formal, let's call it, conundrum that we might face here. But that's me. So I think Roman said, I think this is a WG decision then. Should we just put this to a list and call it like, I don't know, a humming thing on the list?
Well, I'd like to hear Roman's thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, my personal view is it's better placed in COSWID, because I feel like the earlier conversation we had when we were developing this is that we may want to take a divergent path. But again, that's my personal opinion. We have laid out an argument that we could rationalize it one way, or we can rationalize it another, and there are consequences for going one way or another. It's up to the working group to decide which way they want to lean. And I think either way, we should document, the consequence of that, or the coordination that gives us. As I said, personally, it makes more sense as COSWID to me.
Okay. So I think it's the duty of the editors to try to weigh the pros and cons of both options, present that to the working group, let that be bashed, and then that is the basis for consensus building. Does that sound fair?
I mean, I would just like to see the authors come up with a strong, clear, coherent recommendation. This is what you think we should do.
My recommendation is, our recommendation is as is.
In writing to the
We should do it as is.
In writing to the mailing list, and then see if anybody is opposed to it. And then if nobody is opposed, then roll it into the document. I don't think we need to have a bashing of this on the mailing list.
Okay.
I was fine until the last part about rolling it into the document. I mean, because I think the document is clear that the intent is to provide this registry to be used by both efforts. So
Okay,
I don't know what additional we would roll into the document.
so there might not be any
And-
changes to the document, but whatever changes you
Yeah.
need to make to the document to address all of Roman's comments, and resolve this open issue, and then update the document so that we can move on.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay. Although I don't know what the update actually would include, but yeah.
Just go back and look at Roman's email and make sure you've addressed all of his things.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on CoSWID?
Otherwise, then what's our deadlines here? Maybe procedurally, I want to ask, do we have hard limits?
Yes, we need to get this done. Is there any possible way you guys can get this sent to the email list by the end of the week?
No.
Probably not this week.
How about end of next week?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
end of next week. Okay, so with that, if there's nothing else on CoSWID, end of next week's our deadline for the next update. And Kathleen, did you want to talk to Adam's document? I can do the slides or you can.
If you could, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, so this is on the architecture draft and the way forward. Next slide, please.
Did it do my whole screen or no, it didn't? Okay. There.
Okay, so these are just a list of the recently handled issues. I'm not Adam, so I did not handle them, so I cannot go in depth on these. If there are questions, though, I can relay them, and he can also watch the recording. So if there's any questions, otherwise we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so these are some of the open issues. If you have comments on the security and privacy considerations, and defining the method to describe capabilities, please provide comments. And there's also an open issue to add a section or a subsection on attestation. I think this would be an important addition. This is something I personally would, I could put my hand up to help on that, and maybe some others interested would like to help to round that out, so we could think about, posture assessment in context of SACM type capabilities, but also attestation, so that we can simplify and make it as easy a process as possible for people who are trying to assess system security.
Hank, I think Hank is in the queue. You have a question, Hank?
Or to volunteer to help as well.
Just highlighting a universal comment on the use of the term attestation. I don't know how to phrase this. So there's this attestation is a bad word somehow, because you never know is it an action? Is it a
So I
thing?
think he means here a tie to the RATS working group, and so
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we don't need to pick on this,
Okay.
bullet, because this is just a bullet on a slide that says, hey, we
Okay.
have to recognize that there's going to be a relationship there.
Okay.
So if you'd like to help on text or to work on reviews, I can do the first draft. I'd be happy to do that for a section on that to tie it together. And then if you could help work on it, then we'll make sure that there are no issues together.
Yeah. Issue 7 is on my list now. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your help. Next slide, please. Unless there's any other questions. Okay, so I believe he's been doing some work with the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, for CIS, Center for Internet Security, and also the United States government's doing work there. And so I think this is getting at, so working code for instantiating the SACM architecture. So this is useful work for that community. And it's ongoing until it's done. So I believe Adam is seeking help in a few areas to help get this draft wrapped up. And then if anyone else is also interested in the Open Cybersecurity Alliance work. So I'm willing to help on the attestation piece of the draft. Is anyone else willing to help as an editor on the draft, perhaps, and to help, contribute text or reviews? Reviews would be quite helpful to help get this wrapped up on issues.
Michael, join the queue.
Hey, you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathleen, and everyone else. Yeah, I just wanted to note, you noted USG there. I've been working alongside with Adam in the PACE effort, and we have been, as Kathleen noted, trying to do, I guess, in some essence, experimentation coding on how to instantiate SACM under the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, and trying to help support at the same time defining out the rest of the SACM architecture. So just wanted to say that the work is moving along really well, and hoping to support in editing or writing to the draft where I can.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Great. And I think the working group would appreciate, or does appreciate, that assistance just to get this moving more and wrapping it up.
Yes, thank you. Hank?
Yeah, so my first question is, at which stage do you think this work is right now? So I actually, I'm following PACE. PACE was mentioned, I don't know, a year ago. I think the first time it was highlighted, and I was carefully following that work, and I have a hard time understanding where we are right now. So is it like in the middle of it? Are we in the finding the terminology place? Are we building the overall concept still? Are we in the polishing phase? So where is this work currently?
So if you
process-wise?
read the slide, they're working on code that instantiates the SACM architecture. And so terminology and things of that nature are addressed within this working group. So I really hope, because this working group's been going on forever, that we're pretty far down the path.
Yeah, so that's another problem. So because I don't know where the state of the SACM architecture is, I can't really map what targets the code is now set. So what the requirements of code are based on the architecture. So maybe you could help us there. Yeah, of course. Yes.
Okay. So what's your assessment from reading the draft? And have you provided comments, and have the comments been addressed?
No. I did not provide any comments. My assessment is that it is an arbitrary set of, let's call it solution building blocks that are in software. But in the end, I do not know what the current problem that is addressed. That's my first of all question here right now. So I understand the problem of SACM, of course, but I don't see that problem of SACM addressed in the OCA code that is on GitHub at the moment. So there's a disconnect, a mental disconnect for me.
Okay, so that would be for OCA, and maybe Michael could answer some questions. Let's keep the draft separate so that SACM can eventually close.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just jumping in here real quick.
Please.
The PACE effort as it is under OCA is actually fairly new. It hasn't been going on for a year. It's only been a few months. It's been in relation to what's been going on in SACM for a little bit, and there's been discussions around how to start codifying this. But from that aspect, it hasn't. I don't know where the year came about from. But
yeah, because Adam mentioned it. Sorry, Adam highlighted this back in the days.
No, yeah. So I mean, that being said, yeah, we are working towards that to try and help, define what is within the SACM architecture, but also fuel into what we are achieving within the PACE work of doing posture, attribution, collection, evaluation. So we're moving down that path. And so hopefully we will have more results sooner rather than later. We also need to flesh out the GitHub a little more. That GitHub is still relatively new as well. So
yeah, so it's hard for me to connect the dots. So that's what I'm saying here. So when you're highlighting this is addressed in SACM to some extent, I can't really bridge that gap today. But I'm sure there might be something there in the future, and I'm happy to provide comments as soon as that happens.
happy to talk with you offline, Hank, and we can, flesh that out a little more just to help in understanding that connection. So
Also, thank you. Also, always appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we have volunteers to help in a few areas from both Michael and Hank. Is anyone else willing to review this document so that we can help progress it and wrap it up? Or even provide text where there's sections that are the remaining open issues? We get some volunteers, please. Anyone? All right, so I guess to the list, I do hope that we get some volunteers. Appreciate your help in advance so that we could wrap this up and wrap up the working group. I think is this one of the last? This is one of the last issues, right? So getting this wrapped up would be really great.
All right, so Roman is joining the queue.
Proceed, kind of, Karen. I think we're about to talk about the same thing.
Yeah, I think we are. So the next item on the agenda is the way forward for the working group. Let me switch back to my other slides. Well, actually, it's just a slide that's blank and says way forward. So at this stage, at the last meeting of the IETF, Roman gave us a set of objectives, and that we needed to make progress or recharter, to make progress and recharter, or we needed to close. And at this stage, we are opening the floor to discussions for way forward. Taking my chair hat off, or I guess leaving it on, I'm not sure which is more appropriate. I feel like we are not making the progress that we need to make, and perhaps it is time to close this working group. Chris, did you want to say something? I can't hear you, Chris, so maybe you're...
They come off of mute now? Okay, how's that?
That's good. That's good.
All right. I took a look at the PACE working group. I watched some of kind of Adam's updates. One of the comments from Bill at the last, when he presented architecture at 111 was, looking for to continue their monthly update pace for the architecture draft. I haven't seen that. The last updates I see at the PACE GitHub site are from Dave Lemire, who's a really nice guy. I like Dave, but he's never come to IETF. The work seems to be mostly happening outside of IETF, so it's unclear to me how we have an IETF working group or something that standardizes it.
So at this point, we're open. Up for discussion.
Hi. To add on what Karen and Chris said, there's an echo. All right, let me drop in region.
I'm afraid it might be Chris.
Got it. So I don't hear an echo now. All right. So, to reinforce what Karen and Chris said is, I feel like we have a real energy issue in the working group. We have a COSWID document that is our second from last kind of work item, and we're barely able to get updates to meet specific IETF kind of meetings. So our cadence is we're best case getting an update one spin per every time we meet. We just talked about the architecture document, and we're unable to solicit kind of additional kind of reviewers. And as far as I know, we didn't even get an update for this particular meeting. So all the data to me seems to be pointing that we've really run out of steam here. So if we wanted to proceed forward, we would need a very strong demonstration of renewed interest and commitment from, frankly, new parties that would re-energize us to do something.
Karen's audio.
You're right. Oh, I see what you're saying. I was talking and didn't have my audio. So I don't know where the echo is coming from.
Still might be Chris.
Okay. Echo's gone. So I think we need to decide at the working group level what we want to do. And then we need to, depending on that decision, we need to talk about what each of the 2 remaining documents, what we want to do with those. Starting at the working group level, the recommendation is to close the working group. And I haven't heard any arguments for keeping the working group open. Okay, so go ahead, Hank.
Yeah, so the only real requirements I have on the working group is let us finish COSWID, and then it's okay. So if that's fine with everybody here in the working group, I think I can't speak against what Rowan just said, that there's I don't know, we're losing steam, and that's fine. There's content here that might be salvaged to some other place, and PACE might be a place. I can't talk about that, but I think there has been a significant evolution and significant effort put into understanding how this distribution of posture information works. And I know that other SDOs are taking up on that, and maybe there's some way to not let this go to waste, so to speak. I mean, there's a lot of lesson learned here, and I think that is not to be underestimated, seriously. On the other hand, in this working group, it might not come to any fruition now. So I don't know where this the fragments of its remnants will end up, but I would really like to highlight that we should take care not to just put them into the drawer and be done with it.
Right. So so for the high level working group decision of closing the working group or not, I think probably what we want to do is send a quick note to the mailing list and give a week or 2 to see if anybody has any strong reasons why and strong commitments for why the working group should should remain open. And in the event of that, we should proceed with closing the working group. Not talking about the 2 specific documents yet. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Just because Adam's not here, I would like him to have a chance to speak up, and Michael as well, because their work is being implemented, right? So we do actually have an implementation behind the SACM architecture. Even if that means they're given some kind of quick timeline because of the lack of energy, just to get it wrapped up, and so that they're forced to put a fire under the draft and get it finalized.
Yeah, I think part of, and perhaps Roman can speak here, but part of what I was trying to do is to separate the working group decision from that draft, because I do think, I think a lot of work has gone into that draft, and I do think that it's making progress. And so there's a couple options for how that might be handled going forward. So that's why I'm separating that from the closing the working group discussion. But Roman just joined. So.
Yeah, it just, when a working group closes and a draft is left behind, it's never a good thing. But Roman's the AD.
Yeah, I mean, I am really sympathetic to that predicament, but I would like to just kind of reiterate for everyone, this is not a new conversation. We have set the January timer a couple of IETF meetings ago, and everyone is aware that this is kind of what we're heading, and no one's voiced anything kind of new. Again, I'm very sympathetic to the drafts we have in flight, but we need demonstrated energy to convince us we can close it. And as far as I can tell, we've seen no bolus of kind of new energy on kind of either document to get us to closure, given the cadence of publication. I personally think we can get CoSWIT across the finish line. I mean, frankly, those directorate reviews came in early August, and the fact that we're just talking about them 3 months later, is exactly the problem kind of we have. But we are very far along. We're through AD review, and we're through kind of really director review. So I think we can turn it around by January. I honestly have less confidence in the architecture document. We didn't even get an update for this meeting. And if there is this huge amount of kind of interest here, we're seeing none of that demonstrated here, reinforced here by the fact that we couldn't get any reviewers just even in this meeting. So I'm just kind of wondering where that energy to closure is going to come from.
Jess?
Hey, yeah, I wanted to, I think Roman made my point for me, but I think one of the reasons that Adam and Mike brought some of the architecture work to OCA was to try to get more engagement, try to get more energy behind an implementation that we couldn't seem to muster the energy in IETF. And I wonder if, I feel that the document and the implementation might even be stronger if they went hand in hand together. Maybe, and I know to Karen's point, we shouldn't be making decisions about this, but I want to toss this out to the group to consider if that work could just move to pace so that it doesn't die, it doesn't go away, it just goes to a place where maybe there's a little bit more energy behind it.
Well, that was one of the things I was thinking, was maybe it could go to pace, and maybe when it's a lot more mature, it could come back and potentially be published through the IETF with various options. So it's a little bit unfortunate that we do seem to be picking up steam at this stage. But if all of the work and all of the energy currently is over there, then it seems to me then that's maybe where the work, at least at this stage, should be. That's just in my opinion. I am here to serve what you all want. So, all right. So, any other comments or suggestions? Okay, so I think the next steps are a message to the mailing list about the plan to close the working group. The CoSWIT authors have their marching orders for the end of next week on an update, and maybe a conversation with Adam and Mike and others that are currently working on that about transitioning the architecture work, at least in the interim, over to PACE. Did you hear anything different, Chris?
That's what I have in my notes. That's what I've written down to this point, I would say.
Okay. Roman?
So again, I just wanted a third option. Chris, can you mute?
Chris?
Uh, so everything you sounded was great. Maybe I'm not remembering one piece kind of correctly. Was there a discussion about downscoping what's currently in the architecture document and changing how much detail it provides and rethinking, I believe, the track of how that was published as potentially a third route? Am I not remembering that right?
Well, there wasn't any discussion today. I think one of the challenges is it would be really helpful to have Adam as part of that conversation. So maybe that's something we should take offline with him.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that it was during the meeting. I thought there was an earlier, perhaps this was a private discussion about, I won't say more, we'll kind of have it on the list, but I think it was around, right now, the current document is a PS, and we could potentially make it informational to make sure that the working group has an artifact it kind of finishes with, and then that would dovetail onto what we've been discussing here, that PACE might pick up where the working group left off. We'll get Adam.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought about that. I don't remember if it was this context or another where there was a discussion about AD sponsoring a document, but I might be remembering that in a different working group, unfortunately.
Whoa, I'm not remembering that one now.
Okay, so I am remembering a different working group, so.
Two can play at this, right?
Yeah, there's too many conversations going on at once. So, but yeah, I think that would actually be a conversation to have. When you first said downscoping the document, I was trying to put time bounds around. I mean, there have been many conversations about the scope of architecture, and it's it's bigger and it's smaller and it's bigger and it's just.
I apologize. We'll let Adam we'll let Adam speak. But the way I believe some of the conversation went, and this was my word, was downscope. So there are outstanding kind of issues that I believe some of the implementations have identified, and some of them are open issues. And then there's always a desire like, let's close them. And by downscope, I meant was not to address them, to just acknowledge that these are issues with the architecture for someone else to kind of fix, but they will not be addressed here, to be able to put a pin in it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would, I mean, especially if Adam is amenable, I would be, it would be nice to be able to wrap this up somewhat, because there has been an enormous amount of conversation and work that's gone into this over the years. So, so I think the action then is to follow up with Adam on what his thoughts are on wrapping this document up. All right. Thank you, Roman. Any other questions or comments?
I have nothing more. I think we have a very cogent plan. Like you said, we'll put something on the mailing list, confirm that we are going to wrap things up in January, as we said with the milestone. We heard from the CodeSquid folks from the team saying they're going to get something out to us next week. And I would hope that we could maybe even put something on the late December telechat, if we can get through IETF last call. And then we just discussed, there's a little bit more conversation we need to have around the architecture document. But otherwise, I mean, everything you described is great. So I was just repeating to make sure I caught it all.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'd like to, if there's nobody else left in the queue, I think that draws our SACA meeting at IETF 112 to a close. Like to, okay, so the 14th December telechat. All right, and with that, everybody have a good rest of the IETF week, and see you around the virtual hallways.